and we start with another presentation about impact of linked open data standards by Julien. So I have to check back. You can open your mic and camera and share your screen.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Okay,
Hello.
here you go.
All right, let's do it. Okay, hi, everyone, and thank you so much for attending this session. I'd like to also thank the Sweep 25 organizer for the opportunity to present this research, which is based actually on some key findings from my PhD thesis, which examined how collaborative structures and standardized data, more specifically linked open usable data, can support exchange and reuse of information in cultural heritage. Okay. So yeah, as I said, it was conducted as part of my PhD thesis at the University of Basel, which I successfully defended last year, and exactly last year, that was on the 18th of November, 2024. And I had a particular focus on community practices and semantic interoperability, and today we're more talking about the first aspect. And I employed a few methods, but mostly based on the actor network theory as the theoretical framework, which allowed me to consider also the non-human agency in those networks, in those communities. And much of my empirical work was conducted within the PIA project, which is a very long title again. So the Participatory Knowledge Practices in Analogue and Digital Image Archives, so which was a Swiss National Science Foundation project. And it was kind of a laboratory to test IIIF or linked art specification on photographic archives. And also the third part was because I had I could do also some testing on the Deluxe platform, which I think was presented either last year or 2 years ago at SWIB, so on a large scale institution. So linked open usable data, if you haven't heard about it yet, was conceptualized and coined by Robert Sanderson, who has been deeply involved in developing and maintaining web standards for cultural heritage. And the concept emerged from his quite extensive experience with both technical implementation and community building. What makes linked open usable data quite distinctive is its focus on making linked data more developer friendly through JSON LD. And yeah, it's more a pragmatic approach to semantic web vision. So it emphasizes more usability and than the semantic rigor. It has a few design principles to increase usability. And if you think about the ecosystem, and I'm not saying this is the full extent of linked open usable data, it goes way more than about 3 standards, but there are several community-driven technology, especially IIIF and linked art, they can go way beyond that. But for my thesis, I basically, for the first one, IIIF and also linked art, but recognize also the advancement of the web annotation data model. So IIIF provides standardized ways to share high resolution images or based images, 2D images at the beginning, also videos now, 3D images quite soon in a formal way, and widely implemented across libraries, museums, and archives globally. And then the web annotation data model, which is a standard for creating and sharing annotations across various platforms from the W3C consortium, as well as linked art, which is based on Silox CRM and provides some rich description of cultural heritage objects and their relationships, and has a focus on art museum collections, but there's also some broader application, right? TruePath is not only about images, and linked art is also not only about art objects or artworks. So together, these sets of technologies can form a complementary stack that addresses different aspects of cultural heritage. And here is kind of a diagram that we did, that we through a paper, and it illustrates how a cloud-driven infrastructure could look like a work in practice. So showing the different integration of various components that support both the creation and consumptions of cultural heritage data. So the similar structure demonstrates how different standards, TruePath for object delivery, if you will, recommendations for collaborative annotations, and linked art for semantic description could work together. And I'm going to address different key findings. And the first one that I'd like to talk about is the, which focuses on the critical role of community engagement in the development of maintenance of loud standards. And this finding emerged primarily from my analysis of the linked art and TruePath community. So this is not, I mean, you don't see those pictures quite often, because with the exception of annual conferences or face-to-face workshops, the vast majority of meetings take place online. These are open, usually with a clear agenda written Google Docs, but then mostly GitHub is used as a central platform for collecting use cases, but also to advance how the specification should look like. So these writing specifications are done actually this way. And here is one example of those consensus building. So that was the quite a major milestone in the TruePath community, was the release of the TruePath image and presentation APIs 3.0 in 2020. And it illustrates the process taken to review, validate, and release both of these specifications. So you see that it starts with the groups, so that's the editors. There were 5 at the time. They identified and proposed changes, and then those changes were discussed and reviewed by members of the technical review committee, or the TRC. So here are all the people that have put a like on the given issue to say yes, they agree, or they have some comments on it. And then there is kind of a distributed agency that defines this community-driven process. So here's a major milestone. It's the release of the specifications, but it also works the same way for cookbook recipes. So-called cookbook recipes are very small pieces of JSON, LD snippets, if you will. And something other, but I'm quite sure you know that if you participate in any communities or working groups. So it illustrates the patterns of participations here in linked art. So between January 2019 and March 2024, and during this period, more than 100 people, actually 130 people attended 115 meetings. So the average attendance was about 13 sessions per participants, but the median was only 2. So it suggests that there is a very, very small core of consistently active members outside the larger group with sporadic involvement. So it reflects also some of the challenges and successes of maintaining those community-driven processes, especially within a volunteer-driven environment. And the challenge lies not only in attracting more participants, but in encouraging those who are currently passive to engage more actively. So kind of a similar participation pattern was observed in the TruePath community, and I would actually say that it's quite common here, but it's also very Western focused, as we would say. I think I have a few things to say about that later. All right, some key findings around those power dynamics and how we can do better inclusions in those communities. It's true, it's observed as a central platform for collaboration in both community. It's great because it gives transparency, but also have some biases. that can also be found in other open source software communities. And the analysis of meeting attendance showed a small core of participation, primarily from Western academic and cultural institutions, very big institutions, drive most of the decision-making process. So there is one statement that I quite like to say that standards are made by the people who show up, and it become quite evident here. And also there is this demographic homogeneity among active participants that has led to specifications that may, well, maybe address the needs on a technical level, but maybe not or to the point that it is diverse enough in every cultural context. And that is still something that we need to prove, especially when you use use case based to create your specifications. So the minutes for meetings demonstrate also, well, very much Anglo-Saxon approach to consensus building, very few substantive points and critical turning points. So it was, there is a structure, there is an agenda, and we go towards that point, which is very good because you are in terms of efficiency, but then it also is very difficult in terms of self-reflection. So also emphasize, my research emphasize also that participation in these processes is itself a privilege that requires time, resources, support from a given institution, and it's not always available. And I do have some insights about that, and in the STS perspective, it's what Donna Arroway talk about is more making with approach, right? It's not always that you need to acknowledge interdependence across those diverse communities and perspectives, but it means that you need to move beyond what she called tokenistic inclusion to a more fundamental transformation of power dynamics. It's not easy to achieve. You need very different needs to do that, but I think this is something when you have a governance like in IIIF committee, because it's way bigger now in terms of participants that you could still create. And there are also practical steps that include addressing specific barriers. You can think of translations, but you also think about, and that's something that I quite like also about the SWIB conferences. Well, you have to put a time where most people can attend, but you also need to put times for people that are maybe based in Asia, Oceania, and so on. And for lasting changes, this committee must move beyond viewing inclusion just as a static goal, but embrace that as something more as a reflective process. So now maybe it's more the technical bit of my talk here, and I'm going to talk about the different implementations that we have done and also the difficulty in doing it. Here is like a kind of a synoptic view of the PI infrastructure, and it showcases the connections to the DASH service platform. So that's where the data is preserved for the long term. So the DASH is the Data and Service Center for the Humanities in Switzerland. And that's where data and metadata are preserved. But they don't have all the API. They have like the IIIF image API. So we have to put a few things based on that to create what we needed. Also, exactly at the same time of the project, we had database migration. So it was really an organic process just to create those resources and to be able to do annotations on photographic archives, for example, and also to have those either APIs or serializations being done properly. So yeah, we face quite challenges. I'm not going to go through all the details. I can basically answer any questions you have later on the chat or later. But those technical challenges highlight also that while those so-called loud specifications are then self-open, when you start implementing them, you have you still need like a solid infrastructure, and that's something that in terms of a research project was, well, we could easily create something, but then maintain that was beyond the scope of the project. Here is just an example of how we wanted to make a few things that were invisible more visible, and we use either more like a crowdsourcing methods, but also machine learning. Just so here is Retriever that has generated automatic annotations. You can see the different kind of objects or people or animals that are on it. So there is object detections being used here by this algorithm. And the goal for us was just to make that available as well. And if that was not present in our metadata, we could just have it as well there. So that was one of the very, very easy, I guess, steps to do it. For the machine learning part, for the crowdsourcing parts, that I think what was missing here was the governance in terms of who is able to access, right, with or without login, who can make assumptions. And well, in research projects, it's kind of easy because you can create your own scope, but then later on, then there is always a talk with the photographic archives in terms of what were their needs. And here is something that we had as an example that I'm going to show as a kind of a digital materiality use case. This is a photo album, and we decided to create those kinds of layers. So here the presentation APIs helped us to do that. But that was really like a very boutique thing to do because, of course, I had to create just one script so that the images were basically the same width because when they were photographed one by one, they didn't have exactly the same width, and so we had to do some kind of collage to make it look seamless, but actually it isn't. So it was a very, very long process, but that was something that was wished from the cultural anthropology team in our research project. So that's also something that is quite possible here in terms of annotations through IIIF, and then we also wanted to do some semantic let's say markings on top of it. From a very small boutique approach to something on a very, very large scale, Yale has also implemented all the APIs that we tried to implement in our small research project. And so if you do not know, the LUX is based on multiple Yale institutions, the University Library, Center for British Art, Peabody Museum, and University Art Gallery, as well as their respective archives. So the technical architecture includes a multimodal database, here MarkLogix, which is capable of handling data from different source systems, and implements quite a comprehensive ETL pipelines that normalize data and apply unified vocabulary control, mostly using Getty resources, so and also the Getty vocabularies, AT, ULAN, or TGM. So LUX provide kind of a standardized JSON LD API endpoint that follows the linked art specification and also IIIF for image delivery. And what is quite important here is how they have done reconciliation either internally but also externally with different authority files. So in terms of vocabulary, but also Wikidata or different or GND or BNF just to enrich the different metadata that they had. And that's something that we try to see is, well, it's nice that they have those all of those Getty terms, but we tried to see if it was also carefully constructed within each of the 4 different sources that they had, and how to do more alignment and connecting the metadata across the collection. So it highlights the shared usage patterns of vocabulary terms between those institutions. And here, especially in this image, about the Yale Center for British Art, the Art Gallery, because they both have, well, not exactly the same scope, but more art museum objects. And there is some few significant intersections, and it also ensures that control vocabulary terms could be aligned, enriched, and with consistent metadata. But as you can see there, the most that actually was used like the art gallery with the Julien, they had a very nice alignment there. So even for bigger institutions, that's maybe also a key point that I have. They also have to do a lot of refinement, still doing it to align also internally, to break those internal silos. So in conclusions, I would like to point out 3 different critical dimensions of LAD that must be addressed together for these standards or compliance specifications to fulfill their potential. So first, sustainable development requires ongoing community engagement that extends beyond initial specification development. That's why it's actually maybe the most difficult step, I would say. And the social fabric of these communities is as important as the technical specification they produce. And broadening participation remains still a key challenge, something that I think is hand in hand, not only technical aspect, but also the community aspects too, that we have to do as a whole. And second, confronting power dynamics in inclusion frameworks is also very important, and that the current demographic homogeneity in these community perpetuates biases and limits some perspectives. So meaningful transformation require changes to governance and participation models, particularly to incorporate voices from beyond Western academic and cultural institutions. And thirdly, and so that the technical requirements for democratizing access reveal that while LAD foster cross-institutional semantic interoperability, those implementation require a a delicate balance of technological sophistications and governance as well. So Lux demonstrated a very successful implementation model that transcends those institutional boundaries. And the socio-technical infrastructure is necessary for this implementation demands not just technical expertise, but also different kind of framework pipelines that distribute maintenance responsibilities across those institutions. And looking forward, I'd say, and I hope that my research suggests that there are several important directions for future work, that they need better methods for quantitative impact assessments. So in terms, for example, of development metrics that could measure the benefits of adoptions beyond those evidence, and also would help make the case for those institutions to invest in these technologies. Also, tiered implementations model could provide pathways for institutions with very different technical capabilities. So to ensure that these standards could benefit beyond well-resourced organizations. More concrete global participations are needed. There is one good example now is the IIIF has done what they call the ambassador program, and that's something that could also help in this. So technical documentation, I know it's available at different expertise levels. That's what we have tried to do with those so-called cookbook. But I mean, even if you in IIIF community, or even in linked art, what we call patterns, but it's still, well, full-on JSON LD with some descriptions. That's also something that we need to maybe come up with. Another thing that has been done in IIIF community is there are some translations of the APIs, but that's why it's kind of hard to keep up. I think there have been Japanese as well as some Chinese translations, modern translations, sorry. And well, that's also something that we need. Maybe some good terminology or glossary could also be also helpful, better than just a one-by-one translation. I mean, you could say that machine learning could help, but yeah, it's still human in the loop is still necessary, right? The other thing that I think is quite important is that user experience research is still needed, required. In the IIIF end, there is still like a new group, working community group, that is going to be again like relaunched, that address those usability issues, but here more in terms of like the viewers and that kind of things. For linked data, it's harder to have those user experience. I think it's more how do we make sure that software developers, even those that do not know semantic web technologies, can still reuse that easily. I think we've done that on the API level and it's good. But then if they do not use, for example, vocabulary terms, like the same ones, even if we try to enforce them at some levels, then the interoperability is just on the context level, but not really on the the more important bits of the research objects. And yeah, I'd say that Loud hopefully could fulfill potential for transforming how we share, discover, engage with cultural heritage, and also beyond. It doesn't have to be cultural heritage. I did a PhD in digital humanities, but it could also be very helpful, I guess, also in STEM and other areas. Yeah, so here is the end of the talk. A few references. I put the link of the presentation. I can do that in the chat, also on the dedicated page of my talk. And of course, if you want to have a look at the different pictures, especially the cat one, is how you can find them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, as I've seen, you also posted a short paper summarizing your talk. I can recommend to give it a look. So no need to read the full PhD thesis. And
No.
yeah, so thanks. There are a lot of interesting references, and if people are not familiar with IIIF or Lux, I can also recommend to have a look at these communities to learn from. They do good work. Yeah, we don't have actual questions to your talk, and we are a bit over time, so I'll just direct to the sources you gave us, and give over to the next talk.